Standing on the site of the former Fort King. It was built in 1825 to 1827, occupied in 1827. It's probably the most significant outpost location of the entire Seminole Wars, all three wars. This was the military headquarters for the state of Florida. All roads came through, to, and out of here. And this was it. There's nothing, almost nothing remaining. Archaeologists, I'm sure, have found some carbon-dated posts dug in the ground somewhere, but the fort was actually burned to the ground after it was abandoned and the headquarters moved. So whatever was here was toasted. And we're not far from the St. Johns River area, which during that same burning rampage, the Seminoles burnt all the plantations up along that way. Bulow, Addison, Dummit, on and on and on. They just took one big swath that burned everything down they could burn. One of the most significant things about this particular fort, besides what I already mentioned, is that in December of 1835, as Major Francis Dade was making his way from Fort Brooke in Tampa, probably 130-40 miles south of here, he was attacked and waylaid by forces under Alligator, Jumper, and a couple other guys, over 200 Seminoles, at the Dade battlefield, which we've been to before, which is near, down near Bushnell. I guess is about the closest town now to it. But on that same day, Osceola and some of his guys were attacking and killing the Indian agent from Fort King. Although it wasn't on this ground. The Fort Thompson and a few of his guys had just taken a stroll for whatever reason, and they were attacked, killed, scalped, etc. That was the signal, the beginning of the Second Seminole War. And as I mentioned before, there really isn't much that remains here. We're on the ground. So that's this is obviously this whole area before it would have been enormous. There were outbuildings and in-buildings, the stockade itself. We've seen Fort Foster and some of the other forts that have been remade exactly in their location. This would have been much, much bigger than that because, again, this was a military headquarters. This held a general and staff and on down. So it would have been very, very, very substantial, large. So this is really exciting. I mean, it's just really exciting to stand on this piece of history. This is probably the last fort area for me. I've been to all the others that are either existing or that we know where they existed. All the other Seminole War sites, the treaty sites, the battlefields, such as they were. Pretty much been to all of those. This was the only one remaining. So we're just gonna take a view of some of the signs and that sort of thing. There really isn't much more other than that we can do. You got the historical markers and that sort of thing. In the woods, which behind me, which weren't, of course, wouldn't have been woods back in the day. They have an interpretive trail, they call it. I love when they do that. They put up a bunch of signs and they carve a path through the woods and you walk through it. It doesn't have any significance in terms of the ground. It just tells you what went down here with interpretive signs while you're walking. I guess keeping you walking is a good thing. So of course, 200 almost years ago, this would have been a hotbed of hustle and bustle, people running to and fro, all sorts of military activity, sutler activity. There would have been wives and children along, the officers, and some of the non-coms, I imagine, who could afford it. They're not open right now, but I guess they have some sort of little interpretive center. This is a national historic landmark. And the fort wasn't burned completely, entirely, 100% to the ground. But what was left was they reused and rebuilt some of what was left, but they never needed it as a fort again. Because by the time they rebuilt it, or put any kind of effort into it again, it was all over. The Indians were all relocated or driven down into the glades, which would have been 10 and some odd years later. Oh, here's the little trail that I was on earlier. Very nice. Very cool. This gives you an artist rendering of what it was. You can see it's much more substantial than the others we've been to. Poison ivy and poison oak, huh? Hope I didn't see any of that because I wouldn't recognize it. Anyway, really isn't anything here to give one a feel of what was here, other than the fact that you know that you're standing on this ground. So with that, and the end of the day approaching, we're going to close out the day. And here's an example of those signs there, all throughout the woods back there. While under siege by local Seminoles, the fort was abandoned in May of '36 and subsequently burned to the ground. It was reconstructed by the Army 1 year later in the summer of '37. Very cool. And of course, this was the way for all those sorts of operations. We're on a hill, on the high ground. Take the high ground. Anyway, that's it. We're gonna wrap this show up and head on